Welcome to Stories of Hope. This is a podcast by the Dream Center.
Where you will hear from people who have stories that once seemed hopeless.
People whose stories of redemption and life transformation are so powerful, they can only be possible by the power of Jesus. Hey everybody, welcome back to Stories of Hope. Super excited about this week's episode. This is Sarah, our co-host, as always. And then today we are joined by Becky Strange. She is one of our very loyal volunteers at our Easley store.
Very loyal.
She's been around for years, and we're just super grateful. So thank you for being here and being on the podcast.
Thank you very much for having me. I really appreciate it.
It's going to be fun. So like I said, you've been volunteering for a while, and you volunteer a lot. And so how did that kind of look starting at the Dream Center? What did the first involvement kind of look like, and how'd you get here?
Well, I guess, how did we really wind up in Easley?
Yeah, right.
We lived in Columbia. Both of the children went to school in Columbia. Mm-hmm. They both went to USC in Columbia. Okay. They both graduated with mechanical engineering degrees.
Okay.
And we thought, hey, we're always going to be in South Carolina.
Yeah.
And then the big one graduated, got a job with ExxonMobil out in Dallas.
Okay.
And I thought, oh no, what happened? My dream. Someone goofed it up.
Right.
And then the little one graduated and he got a job with ExxonMobil and he moved to Houston. I'm like, wait, no, we're supposed to stay in South Carolina.
Right.
And so I said to Charlie, I said, okay, we can live anywhere you want to live. Mm-hmm. Where do you want to live? And he said, well, Texas, I guess. And so I flew out to Texas, found house plans, found a subdivision. Everything was cool. We were going to go to Texas. And then the oldest one says, if you move to Texas, I'll move. And I said, oh, okay.
Okay.
I guess we're not going to go to Texas.
Right.
So I said to Charlie, I said, well, where do you want to go? And he said, well, we both hate Charleston. Yes.
Right.
I hate Charleston. I don't like humidity. I don't like the heat. So
it's humid.
Yeah, I'm originally from Anderson,
Okay.
and we'll get into that as the story goes backwards. And I didn't want to move to Anderson,
Right.
but I have one first cousin who is a lifelong Easley resident, and he's almost 90 years old.
Wow.
Can you imagine having a first cousin who's 90?
Yeah, right. Wow.
So, we came up and we visited him, absolutely fell in love with the neighborhood. I had been in real estate for about 10 years with RE/MAX at that time.
Yeah.
And we looked at one subdivision, one street, one lot, one house plan, and it was it.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So we built the house, and I've been a lifelong thrifter. All the kids' clothes came from the Goodwill. My clothes came from the Goodwill. Husbands, everything.
Yeah, right.
And so it seemed very natural to me that when we moved to Easley, I would start thrifting again.
Right.
So, Charlie and I, we'd every day, about the same. We'd get up, we'd go to the Goodwill, go to lunch somewhere. Mostly it was OJ's Diner. And then we would always go to the Dream Center Resale Store.
Yeah.
And I found so many things at the resale store that reminded me of my upbringing. And I had lost my mother when I was 22. Okay. And so I found a lot of things in there that really reminded me of her. But I guess what really drew me to the store was the people who worked there. Mm-hmm. I'm sure there were men working there at the time, but I primarily got acquainted with the resale store through the women.
Yeah.
And, it was Kathy Covington bringing out a rack of clothes. Yeah. Hello, darling. It's such a blessing to see you. How are you doing, sweetheart? Yeah. Always giving a hug. Yeah. And then there was Barbara. Did you ever know her?
I don't know if I did. She might have been before I got here.
When I would find something, she would always say, and it can be yours, So it was just a really happy place to be. And so Barbara said to me one day, she said, you're in here every day.
Right.
Have you ever thought about volunteering? And I'm like, oh, no, because as we go backwards, whenever I volunteer, I wind up being in charge.
Right.
The boss.
Yeah.
And I don't want to do that anymore.
Right.
That's not what I want my life to be about anymore. Not serving me and getting my will done and having things orchestrated the way that I want them, but to live and to serve under someone else's management, guidance, experience. Mm-hmm. And it's so freeing to just say, I'm not the boss.
Yeah, right.
And so, like you said, I do spend probably 5 to 6 days a week there. Charlie and I, we live the retired life. Yeah. We go to bed about 1 or 2. We kind of have brunch around 11 or 12. I get there between 1 and about 1:15.
Yeah.
And typically stay until the day is over.
Wow, that's awesome.
Because you never run out of things to do.
Yeah, it's true. It's true.
And especially, for a woman, like, I love jewelry. I love things to be organized. I love to decorate because before I was a realtor, I was a preschool teacher. Wow. So, I love making things. I love decorating and, doing flowers and, just fun things.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of fun.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And you can tell, every time I go in there, I think I've seen you every time. And I'm always like, I know I'm going to see Becky when I go in. I don't know who else will be there. But so just from just from being a part of the team here, just thank you for how much you serve the ministry. And I know that you're such an important part of what we get to do, and people know you and love you. And so I'm grateful that you
thank you
hear about our mission as much as
I'm
you
the
are.
grateful one because, now that I have been there so long, I know the customers by name.
Right.
I know what's going on in their family when they ask me to pray for a certain, if it's a granddaughter or a niece or whoever. Right. The next time I see them, they can't believe that I would remember. Yeah. How did everything go for your granddaughter's surgery? How did everything go for your niece? Did they get the job? Right. Yeah. And so I don't really have any family because I'm the youngest child of the youngest child of the youngest child. Right. So the people at the store, they are my family. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, you can tell. I love that.
They are my family.
Okay, well, let's get into some of the, you said going backwards. Let's get back into some of the, just part of some of your testimony and your kind of story. And obviously the whole point that we do this podcast is to just share these stories that we've all experienced, that the Lord has been sovereign over and has taken care of us. And so, regardless of, we've had some people on here that are like, well, my story's not that crazy. And that's how, if I'm being honest, that's how I feel a lot of the time of like, my life has been pretty chill, but also I have a lot of things, even if they're little, that point to the goodness of God and how he is walking with us. And so, I'd love to just kind of get into some of your story and hear it's kind of some of what the Lord has done throughout your life.
Well, I'm honored to share it. And, I find that when I tell people that I have met in Easley, and Easley is a relatively small town. Right. They more often than not say to me, I've lived here my whole life. Right. And my parents live here. Yeah. And that was very, very much not the case for me. Mm-hmm. My father was born in Anderson, grew up at the Boulevard Baptist Church. Mm-hmm. His parents were founding members. And I think you told me you went to Anderson University.
I did, yeah.
Yeah. And the big house right next door to the church. Okay. That's my grandfather Brown's house. Yeah.
Wow.
And, Charlie and I were married there.
Okay, wow.
So, to the best of my knowledge, I think I was the last family person to be married in that home. 36 years ago. Wow.
Which is amazing.
Yeah.
I also feel like we should point out before we get too far, your husband Charlie is also an amazing volunteer with us. Teaches class, teaches Bible studies. There was a while where I was very involved with classes, and that's where I kind of got to know him, and he came in and helped us during Santa Shop one year, and then he just kind of kept going, and I know that he's made a huge impact on our organization as well. So shout out to Charlie, because I'm sure he'll listen too. But.
Well, and Charlie loves it because, one of his greatest strengths is one of my greatest weaknesses. Okay. Which is he is the most patient person.
Now that's true.
You will ever meet, isn't he?
Yes,
he really is. He's the most patient person you'll ever meet.
Yes.
And me, as soon as I ask the question, the answer comes out of my mouth 5 seconds later because I've already figured out what I want to do. Right. So it's just the way it is. Yeah. But so it's funny. Last night I almost texted you, Sarah. Mm-hmm. I felt like I was writing a letter to my children.
Oh.
I started, because, you guys are about the same age as our kids, and I started writing to you, and I was writing, and all of a sudden, and it was quiet, because Charlie knows when I need quiet time, and I thought, wow, it's really like I'm writing information to my children.
That's cool.
So, in any event, my mother never went to church. Okay. She was from New England. She moved around a lot when she was growing up. Yeah. Church for me, we moved to Fayetteville, Arkansas when I was 3 months old. My father was a professor. We seldom went to church, but when we did go to church, it was a social occasion. Right. My mother did not go with us, not because she was an atheist. She wasn't.
Yeah.
I just don't really think that she had taken time yet in her life to consider what did she believe.
Right.
And if you don't know what you believe, how can you teach your children?
Yeah.
You know. I was thinking last night that I never saw either one of my parents read the Bible. But what I did see was my father reading Barclay's commentaries.
Okay.
I didn't understand what he was talking about.
Right.
I needed to be started down here before I could understand up here.
Yeah, for sure.
So when we were still in Fayetteville, it was the bicentennial, 1976, and my mother got it in her head that my brother was never going to amount to anything unless he left Fayetteville and went to school, a private Episcopal school in New Hampshire. And so he is 7 years older than I am. So when I was 7, he left home. And he stayed in school, and then he went to college. And during that time, my father, unfortunately, had a proclivity for losing his job. So we moved from Arkansas to outside of Washington, D.C.
Okay.
And if you can imagine a very middle-class upbringing and then being moved to outside of Washington, D.C.
Right.
It was insane.
Yeah.
I was behind academically. Everything was very different. We lived in a very small townhouse. I mean, it was just a different world.
Yeah.
But, sooner or later, I made friends. We became happy there. And my mother decided that she wanted to attend church. So we did.
Yeah.
And we attended an Episcopal church, which is very much like Roman Catholicism. And so I was made to take a confirmation class. And I don't know, not being, you both are Baptist, I would assume. Confirmation class, it's kind of like a watered down catechism.
Right.
Where I would have to take the class at night, and all day Sunday I would have homework, and I couldn't go play. And, my dad, when he would drive me places, he would say, okay, what does number 4 say? Knowing the commandments, you just got to recite them.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of a funny story on my dad. So when it was time for me to receive my first communion, we were, our church, as well as other churches in the area, were given our first communion at the National Cathedral. Well, the first African-American bishop, John Walker, had just been elected to be the, I don't know, what do you call him, the priest of the National Cathedral, the pastor, the whatever.
Yeah.
And so my last name started with B. And so I was first in my class to go up there and receive hands-on.
Yeah.
Well, we also went to St. Bartholomew's, which was a B. So I was the first one to receive my communion. After he prayed over me, he took his hand and he slapped the devil out of me. My father came up out of his seat.
What?
Oh, yes, he did. And my mother yanked him back down. It was hilarious.
Yeah.
Anyway, so we lived in Maryland until I was about halfway through my 6th grade year. Father lost his job again. We moved to southern New Jersey.
Okay.
I loved it.
Yeah.
My mother hated it. So I went to public schools. The whole time we were there, my mother was like, you got to get another job. I hate this. I got to get out of here.
Right.
So halfway through my, 8th grade year, we moved to Boston. That was another big shock.
Yeah, right.
So we moved to Boston, never attended church the entire time we were there, except once. And there was a boy in front of me in Spanish class, and I had a little crush on him. Found out where he went to church. Told my mother he went to the Lutheran church.
Oh, boy.
Next thing I knew, where were we going to go that Sunday? To the Lutheran church.
Of course.
Of course. Of course, he and his parents didn't show up that day.
Oh.
Of course.
Yep, of course.
Yes. Unrequited love, once again. So I got home like one day from school, and who was sitting in the living room with my mother but the priest? And I'm like,
Okay.
we just visited this church one time.
Yeah.
So anyway, never went back to church. So then at the end of my junior year, for my senior year of high school, my father lost his job again. So this time we moved to New Hampshire. where there was one school, kindergarten through 12, in
Wow.
one building.
Wow.
Everybody had known each other
Right.
their whole lives.
Yeah, right.
And there was me.
Yeah. Oof. Yeah.
That was, and I was leaving all my friends in high school,
Yeah.
that I wanted to graduate with.
Right, of course.
So my senior year was, not that great. And we never attended church when we lived in New Hampshire.
Yeah.
I attended the University of New Hampshire my freshman year.
Okay.
And my father lost his job again. Awesome. So he calls me, tells me. He said, but I got a job in South Carolina. And I thought, oh no. Too far away.
Right.
So came down here, and he told me I could go to Furman or I could go to Converse. And I thought, I'm not smart enough to go to Furman. So I went to Converse.
Okay.
Good school, not a great school,
Right.
but at least when I went there, it was a good school.
Yeah.
I had a good time. No more of that.
Yeah, right.
So I graduated.
Yeah.
And, of course, I was unmarried, so I moved back to Columbia, moved back in with my parents, and there you have it.
Yeah.
And so my dad came home from work one day, and I said, you know what? I think I've dated every jerk on the face of the planet. Could you please find me somebody nice to date? And so about 2 weeks later, he came home with a business card, and I saw it. It said, Charles Strange. I said, Charles Strange? I don't want to meet anybody named Charles Strange.
Right.
And he said, no, you'll really like him. Yeah. And my dad said, he's the cleanest human being you'll ever meet.
That's so funny.
And so we went out to lunch, the three of us.
Yeah.
And 3 months later, we were married.
Okay. Wow.
We were
Married. Wow.
And I was the one who told him that it was going to happen.
Yeah.
But so here's where God shows up. So we were married in December. In March, on Charlie's 24th birthday, my mother was diagnosed with terminal cancer, and she lived 9 months. She was a woman who weighed her food,
Okay.
and so she never had an ounce of, extra
Right.
to live off of, to get strength from. So my mom was diagnosed with cancer, terminal cancer, on Charlie's birthday, March 24th. And she received 9 months of chemotherapy and radiation. She had the type of cancer there. It was like a less than 2% survival rate for 5 years.
Yeah.
So, at that point, yes, I was a woman. Yes, I was a married woman. But I didn't know anything.
Yeah. Right. Still need your mom.
Of course, I needed my mom. I mean, I never even babysat a child because we moved so much,
Right, right.
So yeah, I needed my mother. But anyway, so we would go. This is a testimony as to what a wonderful person Charlie is. So we would go after work to my parents' house, and we would have dinner. And my mom pretty much stayed in the bed the whole time.
Yeah.
And when you have radiation, your skin is burned, and like your sunburn, you were saying, kind of peels
I like
off.
my sunburn.
But my mother would lie back in Charlie's arms because she was in so much pain, and even though we hardly knew her, and she hardly knew him, he cradled her and just sat with her in her pain.
Yeah.
And that was something that I couldn't do. I didn't know how to do it.
Right.
But anyway, after she passed away, I kind of started wondering, who am I? What am I going to be? What am I going to do? And I got the answer the second the pregnancy test turned positive.
Right.
And I have that pregnancy test taped in the front of his baby book. And that's when I became pregnant with our oldest son, Jack.
Yeah.
And, I guess at that time, what I was what I wanted to be for the rest of my life, which was just a mother and everything that entailed.
Right.
So when the children were in preschool, I substituted at preschool. When the children went to elementary school, I was always the school mom. Charlie and I always went on the field trips.
Right.
We always did all the parties. I wanted my children to learn how to speak Spanish, so I taught all the children in the school how to speak Spanish. Right. Those days when they were younger, it was a magical time of pouring into them.
Yeah.
But I regret not pouring into them about the Spirit of Christ, about His love. So one day when, I think maybe Jack was in the second grade, it was getting to be Christmas time, and Charlie said, "What do you want for Christmas?" I said, "I want you to go to church with me." And he was like, "Oh, it's Christmas." Well, okay.
Right.
So we went to like the day after Christmas service, and that's when everybody's home from college.
Oh, yeah.
You can't find a place to sit.
Oh, yeah.
And so we wound up sitting behind this pillar. And our pastor, our senior pastor, was away on a family trip, and so we had an interim pastor. We had the worst seats in the house. We couldn't see him. We couldn't hear.
Yeah.
And it was like, oh, this is awful, And so I said to Charlie, I said, "Come on back with me.
Yeah.
Let's try it again." And so he did. So then we got involved in the church. How do I get involved? Boss.
Yeah, fully in there.
Full of boss.
Yeah.
So, I'm teaching the Sunday school to the second graders, and, Charlie's meeting with the teenagers, and it just became something that I wanted to be very involved with.
Yeah.
In school, even before Jack was he was admitted into kindergarten, but he hadn't even started there. They asked me if I wanted to serve on the board of the PTA.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
I want to control how things go. And it was very much that way through high school. Both of the children went to magnet schools. I was a school board president, blah, blah, blah. But then when they left and they moved to Texas, I was like, wait a minute. When I was in carpool every day and I would see the grandmothers pick up their kids,
Right.
that's me. I want to do that. I want to pick up my grandchildren from school.
Right.
I want to stay in Columbia. I want it, I want it to be the full circle moment where, maybe my grandchildren would have the same kids as my children did. I really wanted that because I had the opposite of it.
Yeah.
And so anyway, they both moved away, and so I was like, what am I going to do with my life? And so then I found the Dream Center.
Yeah.
And I said to Destiny yesterday when I came in, I said, my story is going to be so different from everybody else's. And I said, I kind of feel weird about that.
Yeah.
And she said, don't feel weird. She said, because what you have to share, someone might need to hear it.
Right. 100%.
Yeah. So, we were talking before we began about the Dream Center Women, which is something that I'm super involved to learn more about.
Right.
And, it's growing. And, because I've joined it, I hope to have input into what direction it's going to go and, the goals that we're going to make and the goals that we're going to surpass. But, Chris Wilson said something really interesting during that initial meeting. She said, I had never even met anyone who was homeless before. I had never met anyone who was homeless before. Right. And now I've just gained so much appreciation for things that I have taken for granted throughout not only my adult life, but things that were provided to me by my parents in my childhood.
Right.
But I had also never met a woman who had a man raise his hand to her. And to get to know Amanda and everything that she's been through and those beautiful children, but yet the peace and the sweetness that is still such an integral part of who she is.
She is kind of great.
She's amazing.
Amazing.
Yeah.
But so, not only do I volunteer at the Dream Center to give to others, to do something that I enjoy doing, but to grow as a person, to become more in the gratitude of God, to become more aware of His grace, to share His love to not only the people that I work with, but the people in the store.
Yeah, right.
Because, the hurts that I've been through, oh, please, nothing. Nothing. Talk about a perspective.
Yeah, perspective change for sure.
But it's a cop-out, and this is something that, I've always kind of struggled with. It's a cop-out to say misery loves company. Sure it does.
Right.
But there's misery, and there's misery.
Well, right.
So there have been times in my life where I have enumerated, it's tough to be moved, for your senior year of high school. Right. Oh, boo-hoo, boo-hoo.
Right.
Well, it's tough to have your legs run over.
Yeah, right.
And it's tough to have your husband cheat on you.
Yeah.
And it's tough to have a hand raised to you in fear.
I think it also, what you're saying too, perspective change, what's running through my head is like the way that Jesus lived his life on earth and the way that he modeled this walk with God ultimately for humanity is like he wasn't inside four walls of a synagogue every day. Like he was out with people who were broken and who were hurting and who, not that he was sinless, so he didn't have that in common with them. But ultimately for us to try to model his life is to be with like people who aren't clean cut and like don't have this experience with pain and drugs or abuse or honestly even with the homelessness issue is like sometimes you just get down on your luck and you just get in a bad situation to where it's just where the cards fall. And so I think what you're putting in front of people and the way that your perspective is on serving this ministry and being in the stores and being with people is just like it literally is what Jesus asked us to do, is to not be inside of four walls of a church every day, though church is important. Like the call is to be in the world with people. And now that we have him living in us and we've experienced his freedom, like the only role that we have now is to walk with him and to share the gospel with others and to use our story to help people see it. And so I think that the perspective change that you just talked about and have offered to people listening is beautiful and exactly what, Jesus is probably like up there like, yes, like perfect. Like that's what he's modeled for us. And so I think it's amazing. It's so beautiful. So,
well, I don't know how perfect it is, but I do know that, I meet women all the time and they're like, oh, you always look like you have so much fun in here. And I said, oh, we do. And, but it's so hard to take that first step.
Yeah, 100%.
To go to that first Dream Center women meeting, to go to the first worship night, to volunteer for the first time. So many people have asked me, well, when you started volunteering, what'd you do? Right. I said, they had me wrap hangers.
Yeah, right.
Yep.
Yeah.
What'd you do next? I put backs on earrings.
Yeah, right.
And then it just kind of grew.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's, the other thing that I think about is, Jesus saying, like, you're always going to have the poor with you. You're always going to have the hurting with you. And I think that that's not even necessarily, I can get that backwards in my head of like, okay, only making sure that I'm looking at those who seem poor or that from my perspective. But that's just not the case. Like showing up and wrapping hangers and putting backs on earrings, like that's going to serve someone who in some way in their life, they may be a billionaire and come in the store because they saw a post that we got out there of some antique but they're poor in a different way that you have no idea you're about to. And so I think that's another thing that for me, being a part of this ministry has helped me see is that like the word poor does not just mean like experiencing homelessness or lack of, physical like items. I'm poor and like my spirit has been poor and I've had moments in my life where I feel poor even though I'm, you look at me and you're like, oh, you're fine. And so I think there's just again, I feel like perspective change is just something that you put on offer here that's really, really great. Well,
I think there are many, many different ways to describe what the word broken means.
100%.
Yeah. You can be broken physically.
Right.
You can be broken emotionally.
Yeah.
You can hide it. You cannot.
Right.
But when you are with other women and men, of course, too.
Yeah, of course.
That vulnerability, that brokenness, that need for Christ's healing.
Yeah.
When we all hold hands and pray together, because I'm pretty tall, and so when the women come to me and they're crying, or when I hug them, they're just under here,
right?
And I can just really pull them close,
wow,
and just like stroke their hair and just love them because you can feel touch. You can feel they're hurting.
Yeah,
that's beautiful.
And why my kids are gone. Why wouldn't I want to do that? Why wouldn't I want to give in that way?
Yeah.
I think it's one thing that people kind of forget the importance of is that physical touch. Because some people, like what you were talking about earlier, have been abused physically, been hit, or they feel like they're too gross, too dirty, too whatever to be, hugged or whatever. So like you being able to give that kind of comfort, I think that's a thing that's kind of being lost. You know what I mean? It's like that intimacy of just human physical connection.
Yeah, right.
Yes.
Which is so beautiful.
I agree.
It's so beautiful.
And it's so simple.
Yeah,
You know,
so simple.
I can't tell you how many times when I'm walking around the store, I'll walk by Destiny and I'll rub her shoulder.
Yeah, right.
Or Marie and rub her shoulder. You know, saying without saying, I know you're working your butt off.
Yeah.
I know it's hot and humid in here.
Right.
You know, I know that things are heavy. I know that things are dirty.
Yeah.
But God love you. You're working as hard as you can. And I notice it.
Yeah.
And I appreciate you for it.
Yeah. That's beautiful. I love that.
One thing I want to kind of ask, backtrack a little bit on your story. When was that time that you fully like met the Lord? Because you bounced around from like state to state and you went to church a little bit. When was that moment of like the Lord is like, all right, Becky, you're mine. Like we got this. You know, when was that moment for you?
That moment for me was not when we were attending a Presbyterian church, you know, where I was a teacher, but we had gone to a smaller evangelical Protestant church, where, again, I was ready to go for it.
Right.
So I taught the teens. Sometimes Charlie would teach the adults. Sometimes we would teach the adults together. Soon I was over all of the adult and all of the children's classes, but I was missing something, and it's the something that you asked me about. And so an older couple in our class started giving us Bible studies.
Oh, wow.
And the man especially reminded me a lot of my father in his kindness, but his delivery was 100% different.
Yeah.
He didn't talk about the Bible as an academic piece of work. He talked about the Bible as a book of love.
Right.
And as a book of forgiveness. And as a book of accountability.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
That is love. Accountability is love.
Accountability is
love.
love. And so we started studying to become baptized by immersion. And it was preparing my heart to receive that immersion ceremony that Jesus became more real to me.
Yeah, right.
You know, he wasn't just someone that, you know, my mom would say, well, you know, while you were taking your final exams in school, I was praying for you the whole time.
Right.
Or, you know, he wasn't a person that, you know, when you needed something, you asked for it.
Right.
You know, I came to know the Lord in a completely different way.
Yeah.
You know, one of the things that the pastor came to our house after my mother had passed away, and after the funeral, he had come to our house and was talking to us and was talking to me in the living room. And he said, your mother came to me with the heart of a child, and that's how she'll go to Christ. And while, yes, that's a very beautiful thing, as a mother now whose children are grown, her study of the Bible was very private, and it was done behind a closed door. And I would like to believe that the way I'm serving the Lord now could not be more public.
Wow.
You know, acknowledging the hurt, the confusion, you know, and we are living in very scary times. Very scary times. So, you know, that was there a split second in time, you know, for some people it would be, oh, you know, I was strung out on meth, amphetamines, and, you know, I thought I was going to die and blah, blah, blah. For me, it wasn't that way. It was I release it.
Yeah.
I release it.
Right. And I think a lot of what you said too is just so obviously corrective. Like you get to this point to where like the Bible becomes the living word of God, to where it's like when it talks about that, when you get in enough and you've met Jesus and he becomes a personal friend and a personal savior, and you start to realize like, okay, you're very real, though you may be unseen. I can feel you changing my heart or changing my perspective, or I'm walking with you and I can see the reality of what Scripture says about who you are. And I think even with the like so much of the stores and what you shared of like when you read in Scripture, like it says that he's a man of sorrows, acquainted with grief. Like all these things that you hear about the character of Jesus, and even before he was here and people were prophesying about him, you see all these things come true. That, I mean, exactly what you said. Like he doesn't become just this, oh, I'm asking Jesus to take care of you while you're taking a test and I'm praying. He becomes a, like, even right now as I'm talking, I'm like, I'm talking exactly like right to him, saying these things about him. And so I think what you just said is so beautiful, of just the change into this personal daily walk with a man who came to earth who was caught and was man, and now he sits on our behalf. And so I think that's just, it's beautiful. I'm
I think
thankful.
it ties into your whole story about the whole
Yes,
perspective change.
yes,
Yeah.
it
So
does.
it feels like the entirety of your life and story, it's all about shifting perspective, seeing things
Yes.
deeper, seeing things in a more beautiful way, seeing things how the Lord sees things.
Yes.
100%.
Which is, I feel like that's one of the
Mhm.
biggest perks of like following Jesus
Yes.
is having that perspective change.
Yes, 100%.
Amazing.
And also, I don't have to be in control anymore.
no.
You know, I don't have to figure it all out.
Yes.
Which is the best part.
Which is
Yes.
the best part. Sometimes that's the hard pill for me to swallow
100%.
because, that is my natural
Yeah.
nature, to be that person.
Right, 100%.
But, it's great to just step back
Yeah,
and sit in the peace
yeah,
and say, God, you've blessed me.
yeah.
You have blessed me. Did my life ever turn out the way I thought it would? Nope.
Right.
Nope. But that just goes to show that God always knows better
Yeah.
because he always knows best.
His ways are higher than our ways. His
Yes.
thoughts are higher than our thoughts.
Exactly.
Beautiful. So as we get close to kind of getting to the end of this and wrapping up our time, I just wanted, is there anything that you like, any kind of hope that you want to share, or anything to anybody who's listening that you might want to just kind of encourage with that you've seen the Lord do in your life, or even reiterate anything that we've kind of talked about, just to kind of give one little, blast of hope here at the end before we wrap up?
I would say, for me, the Dream Center Resale Store is the perfect place to contribute. But that might not be the case for everybody.
Right.
So what I would love to leave to women who are my age, who are retired, whose children have gone through school, moved away, you don't have any grandkids, what are you going to do with your life? There's plenty of things you can do with your life. Just give back.
Yeah.
Just give back to someone. You're not good at wrapping presents at the Santa shop. You don't like to be around little screaming kids when they get all excited. Okay,
Yeah.
go to the Shine Soup Kitchen.
Right.
You don't like to do that? Okay,
Yeah.
teach a class.
Right.
There are so many ways just in this one building, just in this one organization,
Right.
to give and to know and to learn and to fellowship and to love.
Yeah.
But the hardest part is taking the first step.
Right.
Yeah.
So, I know that Easley is growing in leaps and bounds. And I can tell you in our own neighborhood, people are moving here from all over the United States.
Oh yeah, it's crazy.
They don't know anybody.
Yeah.
Get to know somebody.
Yeah, right.
And the best and most fun way is to give back.
Yeah.
Because everybody's there doing the same thing you are.
Right.
That's
awesome.
Yeah, so it's so cool. I love it.
Yeah.
So good.
And I'll be doing it for the rest of my life.
Well, it's evident you love it, and
I love it.
We love that you love it. And again, just as we wrap up, just again, thank you just for how much you
Thank you very much.
you love
Both
this
of
ministry, and you and Charlie serve, and you've had such an impact on like the staff's life, on the residents' life, on the customers at the store's lives. Like
Absolutely.
your guys' impact is so beautiful to see, and it's, I mean, we talk about y'all all the time. Like
All the time.
The Strangers come up pretty
Pretty
frequently.
frequently.
Yeah. So just thank y'all, and we love you guys so
Well,
much.
thank you.
So
Y'all are my family.
yeah.
Yep, the Dream Center organization is my family.
Yeah, praise the Lord. We feel that. So,
Definitely.
but yeah, as we wrap up, just thank you guys for listening this week, and we'll see you on the next episode of the podcast.